Okay, so we've just finished German turn 1, and now we get to see what the bot does in the first US turn. All of the bot cards that we drew for the German turn go back into the deck. Even though the deck only has about 40 cards in it, that 40 card deck is enough to get you through some pretty big scenarios. I've played some large scenarios from Beyond Valor. I also just did the Decision at Elst campaign game using the bot, and never once did I get through all 40 cards in one player turn. So some people have asked me about making the deck bigger. I really don't think it's necessary. The 40 cards is plenty to get you through a half turn. Okay, so US turn 1, we go to the rally phase. Nobody has any broken units. And unlike human players, the bot does not place his reinforcements during the rally phase. We'll save that until the movement phase. The bot will have these guys over here coming in as reinforcements this turn. So I'll just move them over here so that they're ready for when we get there. And now we can see how the bot will handle the prep fire phase. So when we do prep fire, we process, we go through the hexes, the stacks, one by one, and we decide whether the units in that hex will prep fire or whether they get marked for movement later on in the movement phase. We'll process the stacks in decreasing strength order. So the 747 with the 8-1 leader will get checked first. Then these two 747s will get checked. We'll do a random selection to pick one, which one goes first out of those two. And we'll finish off by checking the half squad up here. Okay, so we're going to process the units in hex N4 first. And I'm just checking what I wrote here. He has a 2+3 at hex I6. And I think that's his only target. Now a 2+3, if I convert that to a normalized firepower, it's less than 1. And 1 is the lowest firepower amount that can appear on a card. So normally, in this situation, I would not have to draw a card. I would just mark him immediately for movement. But because this guy is adjacent to this one and this one, they have a possibility of putting a bigger fire group together. So these three guys can all see the target in I6. So we have a fire group possibility here. So we still have to draw a card. Yeah. Okay, so the card that comes up is telling me to look for a prep fire shot that is 4 NFP or at least 4 NFP. So if I calculate, this 747 would be shooting at long range, and he contributes 3.5 firepower. If I add in this 747 and they have a fire group, that would be an 8+4 at I6. And if I check, an 8+4 brings me to 1 NFP. So that's not high enough. But what if all three of these guys right here formed a large fire group? I've got 7 + 7 is 14, plus 3.5 more, that would bring me up to the 16 column. And if I do plus 4 from the 16 column, I end up exactly with 4 NFP. So the bot will perform a large prep fire group, and they will shoot at I6. And they will take a 16 plus 4 attack. And the die roll is a 5, so adding 4 gives us 9 on the 16 column, and my guys have to take a 1 morale check. So we start with the leader. He needs a 7, and he rolls a 6, so he passes. And my other squads will both need 7. So I rolled a 6 and a 4 for my guys. They passed their morale checks, and there was no effect from that prep fire shot. Now we only have 1 unit left. We have the half squad in N3. And he has a decent shot. One of my squads pinned during my half of turn 1, and he's stuck in open ground. So even though this half squad is firing at long range, he's got a 1-0. So if I flip a card and the firepower value happens to be 1, which is the lowest possible value, then this guy would shoot. Anything higher than a 1 and the half squad is going to get marked for movement. So let's draw the next card from the deck. And it is a 2. And that half squad gets marked for movement. Now, if I'm playing this with the physical components, whenever a unit gets marked for movement, what I usually do is I just rotate it on a 45-degree angle. But when I play in Vassal, there's some counters from the official solitaire module, and one of the counters in there is a nice little move counter. So I tend to use that when I'm playing against my bot using Vassal. Okay, I'm just getting a few of those counters out, and the half squad is marked for movement. So that's the end of the prep fire phase, and now we go to the movement phase. I've also marked the 8-1 leader here for movement. He didn't help out with the prep fire. So the 8-1, the most likely move that he will make, if the half squad happens to break, or if any of these guys break at some point, the leader will probably move to the broken unit's hex to help out with a rally. Otherwise, I don't really see this 8-1 separating from his squad and doing a move all on its own. But we'll mark him as a move for now, and we'll wait and see what happens. Okay, so to begin the bot's movement phase, the bot has reinforcements coming in. So the first thing that we have to do is choose which portion of the map edge the reinforcements will be entering on. I'm not choosing a specific hex per se, but we're going to place this green marker on one of these hexes along the map edge, and then the reinforcements will be allowed to enter within plus or minus 2 hexes of this marker. So the way I choose where the marker ends up, It's pretty much the standard rule for entering reinforcements on the short side of a map. The numbers here go from 0 to 10. So what I do is basically just do, I roll 2 dice and I subtract 2. Oops. So I do a DR minus 2. I rolled a 9, minus 2 is 7, so this marker will get placed on B7. Okay, and the 4 reinforcement units, I tossed them into my random selection cup. So when a unit enters from off map, we'll pull one of these counters out of the cup. We don't know what's going to be moving in advance. So now there's a combination of units that can move. One of them, the half squad, is located on the map, and we have 3 or 4 units off map that are waiting to come in. So to select between the off map and the on map units, I just roll a die and I do a random selection. So here I did an evens odds random selection to choose between moving an offboard unit or an onboard unit, and it ended up being an onboard unit. So we are going to process the 337 half squad. So bot units, when they move, they're pretty much focused entirely on moving closer to victory locations or objectives. So this 337 is right next to an objective in M4. So his move target is very simple to determine. This 337 would like to move into the objective. Now the way it works, when we process movement, now we look at the last of the values that appears on a card. For every hex that a bot tries to move, we draw a card and then look at the bottom value. And what this is saying is that the bot will move into this hex unless I am able to make one shot at that hex having at least 6 firepower or more. So if I look at this situation here, L3 would be able to shoot at M4. So the 4 firepower would be doubled because of point-blank fire. There's a +3 for the stone buildings, and the half squad would be making an assault move. When the bot is moving, the first hex of every bot unit's move is assumed to be an assault move. Even if the bot ends up making a subsequent move. So that's designed to keep the player guessing. He doesn't know ahead of time whether a unit will only be moving 1 hex or not. In this case, the half squad is moving into an objective, so he's going to stop after the assault move anyway. So if this unit moves here, I would have an 8 + 3 against it. And if I look at that, that's only 2 NFP, and that's lower than the 6. So the bot is willing to accept the risks associated with making that move. So the bot goes for it and occupies the objective with his half squad. So I'm going to hold fire there. The bot assault moved, so I don't have FFNAM. He moved right into the building, so I don't have FFMO either. Placing residual in this hex isn't going to help me too much, so I think I can basically wait until my defensive fire phase to make that shot. I don't see any advantage to firing either L3 or K2 right at this moment. So we go on to the next bot movement. The half squad will stop in M4 because he has moved adjacent to an objective in L3. So he's happy there. So now we're going to move one of the off-board units. The leader in N4 gets saved for the end of the movement phase. Leaders who are moving by themselves, they always get saved for the end. So we don't know what this guy wants to do yet, but we're going to handle all of the off-board units before we worry about this leader over here. So the next thing we have to do is we have to draw one of the reinforcing units out of the cup, and it ends up being a 747. If I would have drawn the leader, I think there's a 9-1 leader in here, then the leader and all three of the squads would have entered together as a big stack. But because I drew a squad, the squad will enter by himself. So I've got this marker placed on V7. Now, the way bot movement works is we want to move closer to the nearest objectives. So that's going to be N5 or N6. And basically what we do is we order the candidate hexes, and then we run through them one after the other. We draw a card for every hex for every movement that we're evaluating. And basically we go through the candidate hexes one by one until we find one that works. So in this case, and the way we choose those candidate hexes, the hexes that are closer to an objective come first, and then we do a second sort. We move the hexes that have the lowest cost of entry. They get treated before the more expensive hexes to enter, because we want the bot to be able to move fast if it's relatively safe. So if I take the objective in N6, for example, now the bot will be able to enter its unit anywhere between N5 and V9. The hexes that cost the least amount of points to enter are V5 and V7. And let's just check how far those two hexes are from an objective. V5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hexes from an objective. And V7 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hexes from an objective. But in this case, V5 will be evaluated over V7 because V5 is not open ground. There's a bit more cover there. So the bot would like to make its first move into V5. So normally what I would do is I would draw a card and I would look at the third value, and I would check whether my guys, the Germans, are able to make at this type of shot against the candidate hex. And if not, then the bot would accept that hex and move in. So if I evaluate F5, I've just drawn the card, and the value that came up is 6 firepower, at least one shot. And if I look at the shots that I have available, the only thing that comes close to being able to shoot at V5 is my guys in L3, and they're out of range. This squad can only shoot out to 8 hexes, and the target hex is 10 hexes away. So the bot will accept V5 and move in for 1 out of its 4 movement points. And now we move on to the next hex of the bot's move. So the bot wants to move closer to these objectives, and it also wants to move into terrain that doesn't have a high cost associated to it. So the next movement target, out of the possibilities, we'll do the hexes that move closer to an objective first. The 2 possibilities are U5 and U6, and we would check U5 before U6 because the cost of terrain is lower. So what I usually do when I'm evaluating a hex for a potential movement, I usually grab, in Vassal I use these move markers. If I'm playing with a physical set, I'll either use a concealment counter or I'll use a close combat counter. But I mark the hex that I'm evaluating until I've accepted it or rejected it. So the card that was drawn was a 6-1 again. L3 again is out of range. The range is 9. These guys can only shoot 8. But now I do have a possibility of shooting with R7. And if R7 were to shoot at U5, he would have a 4-0. There would be a +1 for the orchard, but there would also be an FF NAM for non-assault movement, and they cancel one another out. So I have a 4-0, and that's lower than 6 NFP. So the bot finds the risk acceptable there as well, and he takes that move for his second of 4 movement points. Now I have to decide whether I want to shoot at the bot here. And I decide not to. I'm going to see if he exposes himself a little bit more than he has so far. And now we evaluate the next hex. And the card I drew is a 12-1. So the bot will potentially be a little more aggressive on this hex than the previous 2. And if I look at the possible candidates for this move, T4 and T5 both get closer to the objectives, but T5 is not open ground, so it will get checked first. And now I have to ask myself, do I have a 12 NFP shot against this hex? And I don't. The best I can do is this 4 - 1. That's only 6 NFP, so the bot is going to go ahead and make that move as well. Let's see what I wrote. R7 has a 4 - 1. Yeah, so that's only 6. It's not enough. And the bot moves up for 3 movement factors, and now I have to decide whether I want to shoot at the bot there I hold fire. I was a little tempted to make that shot, but I'm actually going to wait and see. I'm actually waiting for the leader to come onto the board, and it would be nice to be able to break the leader or pin the leader. So I'm being a little patient here, although that hex was tempting to shoot at. And now I evaluate the next hex of the bot's move. The top two hexes under consideration will be S5 and S6 because they move closer to the objectives. And my card is another 12 one shot. And if I look at the situation, the best shot that I would have available against S5, S6 is a 4-2 from this guy. A 4-2 is only 8 firepower. The 8 is less than 12, so the bot decides to go for it again. These guys both have the same exposure, so I'll do a random selection to choose between those two hexes. I'll roll one die and I'll do an evens odds to choose between S5 and S6. It's odd, so the squad will move into S6 for his fourth movement point. And now I have to decide whether I fire at the bot there. I'm being patient and I hold my fire, and now we move on to the next bot unit. Now, choosing the next movement to come in from offboard, we'll pick a counter from the cup, and this time it's the leader. Now, when we pick a leader from the cup, the leader will be accompanied by a squad. So we make a subsequent pull, and it's a 7-4-7. So the leader will enter in a small stack with the squad. As I mentioned previously, if we would have chosen the leader first overall, then he would have been stacked with all of the squads rather than just one. So we use the same logic for this guy's move, and the number one candidate hex will be V5 again. Oops. And V5 was completely safe. And the second hex was U5. And I believe that is also a safe hex. So the stack has used 2 movement factors already. Now we evaluate the next hex. The best candidate will be T5 again. And we draw a card. And I would need to have 2 shots of 6 firepower or more to make the bot have second thoughts about making that move. So I do have 1 shot from R7. And this guy would have a 4-1. So that is a 6 firepower shot, but 1 shot isn't enough. I would need a second shot that's at least that good, and I don't have it. So the bot does decide to go for it, and they move into the orchard for 3 movement factors. And now I have to decide whether I shoot at that group there. And I do decide to take the shot from R7. So my shot is a 4-1. I rolled a 6. So if I check up 5 on the 4 column, it's a 1 MC that stack has to take. And we'll start with the leader. He needs a 7. He rolls a 6 and makes it. And the squad needs a 7. And he pins. And that's it for that group. And we leave 2 residual firepower behind. And now we move the last reinforcement unit. And that's the final 747. And just like all the others, he will enter the map at V5 for 1 movement factor. And he moves to U5 for 2. And now the best candidate for the next hex will be T4 rather than T5. Up until now, we've been choosing T5 first, but now that there are other units there, the bot, unless it's in a building, will try to minimize stacking. So this guy sees that there are units in T5, and he doesn't want to stack up with these guys, so he will try to move to T4 before considering T5. So I draw a card, and the card says 6 firepower, 2 or more shots. And I don't have that type of shot. This guy in R7 can't even shoot anymore, even if he wanted to, because he's got a closer enemy down here in S6. So any shots would have to come from way back here, and I do not have 2 shots of 6 firepower or more. So the squad does move. Yeah, if I look at my notes here, L3, these guys right here, would have a 2-2, which is 6. So I have 1 shot that's strong enough, but I don't have 2 shots that are that strong. So the bot moves into T4 using his 3rd movement factor. And now we try to evaluate the next hex. And the 2 best candidates for the next hex will either be S4 or S5. We're trying to move closer to N5. And just worth mentioning, I decided not to shoot at this guy in T4, but I did have a shot available from L3. I did think about it for a few seconds. If my squad in L3 would have shot at the squad in T4, this guy still has 1 movement factor remaining, and these guys do have the potential of using smoke grenades. And this happens to be an open ground hex. So when a squad has movement factors remaining, and he's moving in open ground, and he's able to use smoke grenades, the squad can make a smoke grenade attempt after I declare my shot. So if I would have shot this guy at this guy, he would have used his 4th movement factor to try to make a smoke grenade check. So it's a little different from the way you usually play out smoke grenade checks. If you're playing a 2-player game, the player moving the unit would actually have to announce that he's making a smoke check before the defensive fire shot gets declared. But I found it leads to a much better game. The bot can use its smoke more intelligently if I let the bot make the smoke check after the defensive fire has been declared. So I'm pretty sure we'll see some situations later on in the game where these paratroopers will be able to use their smoke grenades. It didn't happen here because I held fire, but I'm sure we'll hit some smoke grenade usage later on in the game. So carrying on, we're going to evaluate S4 and S5 to see if that guy wants to go any further. And the card is 16 firepower, 2 or more shots. And I definitely don't even have close to that amount of firepower to bring against either of those two hexes. So the bot is going to move one more hex. But these guys are both fairly equal choices. There's no advantage to one or the other. So I think I decided to do a random selection here, and it ended up being S5. Yeah. So the bot uses his last movement point to move into S5, and K2 decides to take a long-range shot there. So he is 8 hexes away. He's shooting at his maximum range, and it will be a 2-2. And the 747, he's now out of movement factors, so he can't make that smoke grenade check. Squads will not go CX just to get an extra movement factor for a smoke check. So in this case, the -2 for FFMO, FFNAM, this guy's not going to be able to get a smoke grenade there to nullify that. So I roll for my attack, and I roll a 5. -2 is 3 on the 2 column, and it's a 1 morale check. So this guy's morale is 7, he needs a 6 to pass, and he rolls a 5. And that attack places residual, and the bot has one more unit to potentially move, which is the leader in N4. If I go through the rules, there's a little paragraph in the rules that says if a leader is stacked with units that have prep fired, and the leader does not have a broken unit to move towards, then the leader will not move at all. So the leader doesn't want to separate himself from the squad, even though he's potentially able to move. So the leader does nothing, and that's the end of our movement phase.